Good morning, dear Professor Henrichs, dear Professor Koseva, dear guests, participants in the conference, and everybody who is now in internet in the channel. We are here today to start the 3 days conference of LTaDH-RA, dedicated to language technologies and digital humanities, resources and applications. I'm Galia Angilova, the chair of the Scientific Council of the Institute of Information and Communication Technologies, and I have the honor to represent the Chief Secretary of the Academy, Professor Nelly Koseva, to say a few words and to pass to the pleasant ceremony that awaits us in the morning.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, dear colleagues, it's my honor to welcome you on behalf of the governing body of the Academy, as well by myself, of course, to the opening of the second LTaDH-RA Conference 2023, Language Technologies and Digital Humanities, Resources and Applications. The interdisciplinary field of language studies, humanities, social sciences, and informatics plays a very important role in the creation of new technologies to process language data, to elucidate new knowledge, to uncover new facts and relations in the historical data. All these technologies have applications not only in the area of humanities and social sciences research, but also in solving practical problems like discovering fake news, development of new approaches to education, providing access to new informatics, new information, etc. The program of the conference is very ambitious, and I wish you success. I hope that everybody will find a piece of wisdom and knowledge, will be inspired by new ideas and insights during the conference time and to bring back to home. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, today I'm very, very delighted to congratulate one of the distinguished invited lecturers to the conference, Professor Erhard Henrichs, and he is being awarded for merits to the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences. He is connected to the Bulgarian Academy of Science through a long sequence of exchange visits and a number of joint projects like Tübingen Sofia International Graduate Program in Computational Linguistics and Represented Knowledge, Clark Project, Bull Tree Bank Project, Bull Dialects Project, and several European projects. The results from these projects are some of the most important language resources and technologies for Bulgaria, like XML-based system for corpora development of Clark, the Bull Tree Bank synthetic corpus, and dialect dataset, etc. These datasets are the basis of several implementation of language technologies of great importance. The impact of them is much wider and deeper than the work done in one institute that is spread over the society. Thus, I'm very happy to announce that the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences rewards Professor Erhard Henrichs for his merits and contribution to asserting Bulgarian Academy of Sciences as a leading center in the field of language, resources, and technologies. Congratulations. Dear Professor Henrichs, this is the diploma that is for certificate of recognition for merits to the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, and this sign is for you.
Thank you very much.
I'm very happy to meet you and to greet you and to say thank you for all your contribution and efforts.
Thank you.
So this is for you.
think, excuse me, a small, this is a jubilee coin of the Academy from the Institute.
Thank you very much, Galia.
So to look at us,
Thank you.
and although you know Bulgaria because you have been here often, but still you may find a place that you didn't visit. So
Thank you very much, Galia.
you are welcome.
Okay, thank you.
And now there are few people who want to say something about your contribution.
Thank you.
And yes, I would like to, yes, please. Yeah, I would like to invite all of these colleagues. At first, let me say something. Erhard appeared in Sofia in the 90s of last century, and those who are young today cannot imagine the degree of our isolation, which became evident to us in early 90s when the first Tempus project started. We didn't have access to the Western computational linguistics, to Western papers, to the Western and American models of artificial intelligence that deal with language technologies. And after 10 years of progress, I understood that we had been completely isolated from what was happening in this discipline in Western Europe and United States. And that's why we are very grateful to the first people who came and helped us to integrate, which took not only integration of knowledge, but project-based culture of working, education of young specialists, and access to the European networks of language technologies and language resources. That's why we are very, very grateful, more than you can imagine, and more that the young people here imagine, because we remember how it was 35 years ago when me and Kirill were young scientists. Thank you, Erhard. Let me invite Atanas Kyriakov to say a few words.
Thank you, Gala. Good morning, everyone. Congratulations, Erhard. To start with, I want to thank Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, and now it is this Institute of Information and Communication Technologies. Many years ago, it was Language Modeling Co-op, right? When I was involved in this. But the basics is that this cooperation between the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences and the University of Tübingen allowed me to be involved in world-class research in these joint projects. And yeah, shame on me, I never finished my PhD, although Kirill and Gala were chasing me.
You can.
But I'm a sort of PhD drop-off. Immediately after a visit in Tübingen, I generated ideas, and I went to my partners in the industry and said, I want to make a company that does precisely what this project was about. It was Quark, the project, back then. And now, on top of this, we have a company that does very well in some data and content analytics spaces based on these very same linguistic and knowledge representation technologies that we've been working on in the 90s. And that's unique combination that we can see both in the minds of like Kirill and Gala and Erhard. And you can still see this stream of research. Globally, if you go to US, there are relatively few people which work in the middle of this space between knowledge representation, symbolic AI, logic on the one hand, and all the linguistics on the other. So that's unique, and this keeps being unique. So all of our competitors today are US companies with more than $100 million investment. And what we have as our most important capital was these ideas that we gathered in the late 90s, myself and a few of the key people in the company. So I want to thank Erhard personally because, you created the environment which made all these studies and innovation possible in a very international team, in a very diverse team with, like a logician from UK and then linguists from Bulgaria and across Europe. This was quite unique. So I literally got many of the ideas that we implemented in the last 20 years, walking up the hills in Tübingen from your lab upwards. So thank you very much, Erhard.
Please, Vladimir Zhobov.
Dear colleagues, and dear Professor Hendricks, I even wrote something, but I'm not going to read it now, because I have such good memories, and one of my fondest memories are about our work together on this project, which I'm going to mention very soon. Congratulations for this recognition of your contributions to linguistic research, but also to collaboration between institutions, and ultimately, which is perhaps more important, between people. And one of these contributions is, of course, the project Measuring Linguistic Unity and Diversity in Europe. What a beautiful and even somehow prophetic title. It lasted only for 3 years, unfortunately. It was about finding new objective ways of making statements about distance and conversely proximity between language varieties. And I was part of the team that provided the Bulgarian material because I turned out to be good at dropping at people's houses and inquiring about their vowel quality or something. And I remember all the nice discussions that we have, sometimes heated, and we learned so many things in so few years working on that project. But most of all, I was impressed with the work of Professor Hendricks with his students, the advanced ones. And we had the opportunity to meet his students from Bulgaria, both in formal and then in less formal circumstances. And I knew that Thomas will be okay. There was no doubt about that. But I hope they also find their way in linguistics and all. So I wish you to continue in this beautiful manner of collaborating with your colleagues.
We'll have now recording of John Nerban from the Netherlands.
Hello, Erhard, and hello, Petya and Kirill, whom I first want to thank for this opportunity to address you while they're watching you get an award from the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences. A very well-deserved award, I should emphasize. And it's especially a pleasure for me to address you today because you and I have been compagnons de la route for a long, long time. I now count it as over 40 years, which is really a long time, I think, in science and almost anything in life. I want to add that, because I know other people will be listening, that you've also been exemplary in including the Bulgarian colleagues in all sorts of scientific endeavors. And I saw this in natural language processing projects that I wasn't directly part of, but then also in the work on dialectometry that we did together with, well, the four of us did together, Petya, Kirill, you and I, oh, and of course several others, Wilbert and Vlado shouldn't be forgotten in this. You've always been, for me, an admirable scientist in paying close attention to the ideas that are organizing our scientific theories and real care and stewardship of the data. It's been your focus in the last few years, and where you've been one of the real world leaders in that event. So it's great to be able to address you and to say gratuliere or pozdravlение. Bye-bye.
Professor Petya Osenova will present her address, together with few words by Tsvetomira Venkova.
Yeah, hi. You see up to now how many people were collaborating with Erhard for all these years, and what his contribution and his group, because it's also very important that this person led such a wonderful group that we worked with. So many people collaborated, and he made difference for many of our development further, and also for our technology and resources. From my point, I will be very, very short, because I would like to present Tsveti's words. But the project that I joined about Butri Bank, the syntactic resource, is still the landmark of our group. It is freely available, and it was the initiation of many, many other projects, as you already saw. So Erhard, thank you so much for being such a friend to Bulgaria, Bulgarian language, Bulgarian people, scientists, and for doing so much for our research and our development, professional development further. So this is from me, with my heart. Otherwise, I also could talk forever about you, but I will stop. And it is so nice that we also have a greeting from Tsvetomira Venkova. She is our colleague from Faculty of New and Classic Languages at the Sofia University. At the moment, she's in Germany. She would like to address you as well. So she says, I'm very happy to congratulate you on being awarded with the honorary badge for merit of the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences. It is a well-deserved honor to an internationally renowned linguist with outstanding contribution to the development of Bulgarian computational linguistics and modern generative grammar. It was a big chance for me to work with you at the University of Tübingen for several periods of time, starting in 1997, immediately after the defense of my doctoral thesis, and continuing as a Dad and Alexander von Humboldt Foundation scholarship holder. The new things I learned from you during my stay at your department can be compared to taking another academic degree, which is true for all of us, in the most vital areas of grammar and computational linguistics. These were unforgettable times and precious experience. What is more, you have had close collaboration with world's most distinguished computational linguists, such as Ivan Sack, John Bresnan, Karl Pollard, Robert Levin, John Nerbonne, whom we saw already, and many others. Contacts which you also introduced all people from your team. And at very visit at your department, I always heard Bulgarian speech there, Bulgarian bachelor, master, or doctoral students, as well as Bulgarian professors and scientists. They have been integral part of your research and teaching environment. As a prominent figure in computational and general linguistics, you have developed numerous research achievements in the field, which have influenced Bulgarian linguistics as well. Your works are among the key factors for transfer to Bulgaria of the new generative lexicalist non-transformational models, in particular phrase structure head-driven grammar, a framework that we also worked with Kirill, and dependency models. In addition, you have a seminal role in the development of valuable computational resources for Bulgarian language, and we heard about them already. Thanks to your encouragement and recommendation, many Bulgarian bachelor's, master's, and PhD students, postdoctoral fellows, and advanced scientists have received support from prestigious German foundations such as German Academic Exchange Service, the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, the German Research Society, and programs of the German Ministry of Education and Science, European and American scientific funds. Your trust in promising Bulgarian scientists gives them wings to continue. Very nice metaphor. And the vivid and creative work atmosphere you have established in your team motivated closeness and understanding between the German and Bulgarian members of your research circle. We remain connected professionally and personally, bonded by trust and mutual encouragement, clearly aware of your special role in our lives. Your high scientific standards, care, and heartfelt attitude are an inspiration. By investing time and energy in Bulgarian linguistics, you have contributed to the general spirit of enthusiasm and linguistic curiosity, vital for high-quality science. Please accept my heartiest congratulations with respect and gratitude, Associate Professor Dr. Cvetomira Venkova.
Finally, Kirill Simov, and then probably we give the word to you because only we speak at the ceremony.
Thank you, Galia. And I'm really happy that today Erhard is with us. I will be not speaking a lot because people already said a lot of things. The important thing is when you go to Tübingen is that you never see Erhard. He's everywhere, every time busy, but you feel the support all the time. So the new ideas always accepted and developed further. For what I would say, thank you. The good thing is that this is not just to me, but also to many other people in Bulgaria, like Petya and some others. Sorry. Okay.
Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you so very much for this recognition. I truly appreciate it. I must say that I'm not often somebody who is grasping for words, but when I got an email from Kirill and Petya, I think it was sometime in March, warning me that something like this might happen, I was speechless for a couple of days, and I had to digest it, and really it took several days for me to answer, and you probably thought that I had fallen off the earth or was somewhere again, you know, where I didn't read my email. But no, I needed some time to digest this, and so now with a few weeks, I think I can probably give a speech without choking up, and that's, I think, what needs to be done on an occasion like this. Thank you for so many of you who I haven't seen, you know, in a while, in some cases, to come here today, and then also to have John be part of the ceremony. John and I indeed go back to, I think 1980, and I'm aware that some people here may think that this is, you know, a long time ago when they weren't even planned to be on this planet, so you have to just deal with that. But it brings me to some observations about that I think are relevant here. So I had finished a degree in Germany, and I was looking for a place to do my PhD, and after some consideration, I went to the United States and had the honor to work with Professor David Doughty, who was also the doctoral advisor of John Nerbonne, and that's how we met. I arrived in the United States with one suitcase and 5 boxes of books and a lot of enthusiasm. And I must say that I was warmly welcomed by the scientific community at The Ohio State University that graciously provided support. And I learned what it means to be open to new cultures, to a diverse environment along very many dimensions. And at that time, I had the honor sometimes to present John's papers at scientific conferences because he had just become a father, something I wasn't even contemplating at the time. And so sometimes he had other duties, and since he was writing on German at the time, it seemed appropriate that I would sometimes read his papers. And so we formed a very close bond. But I won't bore you with further details. The important thing is what I learned is that apart from scientific achievements, science is really a great environment for international collaboration, understanding, and also pursuing common values. And so when I went back to Germany to take up a professorship in Tübingen, one of the things I wanted to do is to create an international environment. It was very important to me, and I also started a degree program with English as the language of instruction so that we could welcome international students. And at that time, Bulgarians were the number one group in terms of size, and very often also in terms of quality for our new BA and MA program. So it was really very, very rewarding. And then the University of Tübingen started in the mid-90s a new initiative. It was called the International Center, but it had a particular focus on supporting young scholars and academics in general in the countries of Central and Eastern Europe. And Galia, you couldn't have said this better, what it was like. And I think what we're really celebrating today is not me. I'm celebrating what you have all accomplished. Yeah? And it's amazing to see what has developed over the last 25 years or so. I mean, I was walking toward the academy this morning, and there was a car, with electrical cord sticking out, and it was apparently getting fuel, of a new sort. When I first came to Bulgaria, which I think was in 2000, and somebody would have predicted that, I would have said, well, come on, don't pull my leg. Yeah, so a lot of things have happened in the last 25 years or so, and I think something that impressed me very, very deeply early on was the intellectual curiosity and the tenacity that you all had. And this is something that I experienced over and over again coming to Bulgaria, that you would never quit. And so if I had any role in that, and maybe as a rather privileged academic in a rather privileged country, then that was the easy part. The really hard part is what you guys did. And so that's why I think this is occasion not for giving somebody some medal or whatever, but really celebrating this community. And you were very gracious in sort of enumerating some of the initiatives that we had together. But what you didn't mention, and this is what I want to draw attention to, is how much you are now giving back to the community in all kinds of ways. Bulgaria is really, really on the map in this part of Europe and in Europe as a whole for making very, very important contributions in all kinds of ways. You have already mentioned some of the resources that you built, but you are, and now I'm addressing you in particular, Galia, you have been the champion of one of the most prestigious international conferences in Europe, which is quite appropriately called Recent Advances in Computational Linguistics. I still don't know how to pronounce that. I always want to call it RANLAB, but I think it's syllabified. Vlado, you would know how to properly syllabify it, but that doesn't matter. The point is, this is a conference that Ruslan Mitkov, who has made very important contributions to this community, and many others have been organizing to the benefit of the field of computational linguistics as a whole. And I'm already looking forward to another conference in early September that once again is going to focus on the most recent technologies, on deep learning, giving tutorials to young scholars, and then also having a wonderful conference in Varna. Yeah, so one of the things I have to admit that also made it very easy for me to come to Bulgaria many, many times, I've stopped counting, is what a beautiful country you have. Yeah, so the Black Sea coast and the Rhodope Mountains, and I'm going to stop here, but you know what I mean. And we just, the last few days, Kirill, managed to do some hiking to places I'd never seen before. We went back to Plovdiv, which has turned to be such a beautiful city now after it was awarded the European Cultural Capital distinction, but also a small monastery near the Serbian border where Kirill's niece is a mayor. Yeah? So these are people that know how to bring people together and how to organize things. It's in your genes, and this made it all very, very easy. So this I want to emphasize that it's not that this was a one-way street or something like that, but it's been a two-way street all along. We've done summer schools, and I remember there was an occasion where I was visiting Sofia, I forget why, and you were organizing, Petya, you were thinking about organizing ESLI, which is a very prestigious European summer school in language, logic, and information, which has also been going on forever, it seems. And you had, in a very, the way you always operate in a very modest way, offered to hold this conference here in Sofia. And there were some organizers who were visiting to kind of look into what the venue would be like. And one of them, I won't name the name, sort of took me aside and asked, Erhard, you know these guys, do you think they can do it? And I said, well, excuse me, what are you talking about? Of course they can do it. And they will do the nicest job you'll ever think somebody can do in organizing the summer school. And that's exactly how it went. We came, and this is the other thing about Bulgaria. Galia was sitting in the office and she was helping out to make sure that everything was running smoothly. So people help each other out. There are no clear hierarchies here. There are also, but when push comes to shove, people help each other. And this I think, has also made this community strong. And I'm totally convinced that it will be stronger even in the future. So I think we share not just scientific knowledge, but we also share a lot of common values, and that's what it's ultimately about. And I think this is also something that unites us now in sometimes difficult times. And I hope that we will all be fine and that we will be able to preserve the peace and enjoy the kind of freedom that really is at the foundation of human existence. And with that, I now hear this voice louder and louder that a good speech is a short speech, and I'm in danger of violating this rule. So thank you so very much.
Well, now we'll have a short coffee break and then continue with the first invited talk. The coffee is outside, Kira.
hi everybody back. It's time to start with the first invited talk, which will be given by Professor Erhard Hendricks. I prepared a lot of notes about him, but it already was said in the previous session, so I just add that Erhard led a lot of projects on language resources like German Tree Bank, German WordNet, and also he played a great role in green infrastructure on the European level, but also in Germany. So I will give now directly the word to him. Okay.
Thank you, Carol. It's a pleasure to open this conference. I remember the last conference and first LTaDH conference was done remotely via Zoom, and so I think it's wonderful that we can all meet in person again. So I would like to speak today about verification of research data and services and incorporation of new technologies in TeX+. TeX+ is a German infrastructure consortium that I reported on already at the last LTaDH conference 2 years ago. At that time, the TeX+ consortium had just been approved for funding, but it had not started the work yet. So in a way, what I want to do today is a kind of follow-up to my talk from 2 years ago. I will briefly describe how the German National Research Data Infrastructure, which we abbreviate as NFDI, has evolved in the meantime. And I will then also report on some ongoing work that we're carrying out in TeX+. I'll focus on 2 topics. One is how to implement a federated search for lexical resources, and I will also address some legal issues and how to possibly get around them having to do with copyright protection and the development of so-called derived data formats. The second part is very much work in progress, but I think it's an important topic for research infrastructures and fair access to research data. So TeX+ is very much a collaborative effort by more than 30 research institutions across Germany, with a total of well over 100 researchers. You see some of them here on this photograph that was taken at the castle in Mannheim at the first plenary meeting last September. That was also the first meeting in person that we could organize. So as a scientific speaker of TeX+, it is often my role to give presentations like today, where I try to present the project as a whole and give overviews. But ultimately, of course, the work is carried out by a very large group of colleagues. And for this presentation today, I will rely particularly on the work of Kelly Du from the University of Trier, Eric Körner, and Thomas Eckert of the Saxonian Academy of Sciences in Leipzig, Oliver Schonefeld of the IDS Mannheim, Sonja Friedrich of the State and University Library at Göttingen, and Thorsten Trippel from the University of Tübingen and the Institute for German Language in Mannheim. They all have contributed also some of the slides that I will be showing you today. The research data management and research data infrastructure topic has really gained considerable momentum over the past 20 years, with European initiatives such as chlorine and diarrhea, and the forming of European Research Infrastructure Consortia, ERICS, as an important part of the landscape. And of course, Bulgaria has been very active in these initiatives from the very start as well. On the national scale in Germany, the government, that is our federal government, and the regional governments of our 16 states established the National Research Data Infrastructure already in 2018, and then funding began starting in 2020 in 3 funding rounds. And the goal of this national initiative is to ensure easy access on a long-term basis to research data across a very wide range of scientific disciplines by implementing the fair and care principles of data management and by guaranteeing long-term archiving of research data. Currently, the NFDI consists of 26 consortia, each with a particular disciplinary specialization. There is also one consortium for the implementation of so-called basic services, and these are services that cut across all of the disciplinary consortia. And finally, a directorate for overall governance and communication between the different stakeholders and the NFDI. The vision of the NFDI is to consider data a common asset for excellence in research, and to view the national research data infrastructure as an activity that's coordinated by researchers, because they know best what they need and how they can organize themselves so that there is completely freedom of academic research guaranteed when one builds such a research infrastructure. The mission of the NFDI, in order to achieve this vision of data as a common good, is to create an organization of research data management and a legally compliant, interoperable, and sustainable data infrastructure for which the NFDI collaborates with national and international partners. For the area of social sciences and the humanities, 6 out of the 26 consortia are being funded in the NFDI. 4 of them come from the humanities, and we now call this picture here often our 4-leaf lucky clover image, because we managed to divide the field of research data in the humanities into 4 different initiatives, and we collaborate very closely among each other. So NFDI for memory brings together researchers, memory institutions, museums, archives, etc., and information infrastructure facilities in a digital research infrastructure for disciplines that focus on historical data. NFDI for object addresses the infrastructure needs of researchers who study the material heritage for over 3 million years of human and environmental history. And this initiative includes especially archaeology. And NFDI for culture is the consortium that deals with research data on tangible and intangible cultural assets. It includes arts history and architecture, media studies, and a wide range of performing arts. Text Plus, the 4th initiative, then, if we want to say it in one sentence, it's that we will establish a text and language-based research data infrastructure, and initially we'll focus on 3 data domains which are very important for all the philologies and the humanities and actually beyond the humanities as well. And these are collections of language and research and language and text data, lexical resources of all kinds, and also scholarly editions, in particular on historical text. The consortium has been initiated by the IDS, the Leibniz Institute for the German Language in Mannheim, the Berlin-Brandenburg Academy of Sciences and the Humanities, the German National Library in Frankfurt, the North Rhine-Westphalian Academy of Sciences and Arts, and the Göttingen State and University Library. And in addition, we have an additional 26 institutions that participate in Text Plus, and these are academies in the arts and sciences, universities, libraries, research foundations, and academic centers. Text Plus wants to establish a federated research data infrastructure as a network of data and competence centers. There are various reasons for such a federated approach. For legal reasons, it's often not possible to copy data sets from one institution to another. This is the main reason why a consolidation into one central database, including a search index, is not feasible. But of course, there are other reasons as well. Different data centers specialize in different types of research data with different data models and established workflows for the creation, maintenance, and analysis of data. This diagram here illustrates the present situation rather well. In the data domain of lexical resources, Text Plus partners provide lexical resources such as the digital dictionary of the German language, which is housed at the BBAW in Berlin. But we also have traditional encyclopedias, originally printed in books, such as the historical Meyer's Konversationslexikon. There are also born digital resources, such as the German WordNet, Germanet, or the online Wortschatz Informationssystem Deutsch, which is a portal to various resources at the IDS in Mannheim. And these are only 4 examples. We have many more of them in Text Plus. So most of these lexical resources have their own data format and come with their own query engines tailored to the data type and structure of the particular resource. Besides legal reasons, which do not allow us to copy the full data set from one system to a centralized database, the data structures also do not allow us to convert one into the other without risking major information loss. So in order to be able to search all of these databases at the same time, we follow the strategy of what's called a federated search. And if you look this up in Wikipedia, this kind of federated database system is defined as a mapping that occurs among multiple autonomous database systems into a single federated database without data integration into one system. So the constituent database systems remain independent and autonomous, and they can be used also independently from each other. We also distinguish between 2 types of searches. On the one hand, metadata search, which allows users to browse catalogs just like you would in a library, and then also content search, where you can query not just the metadata, but also the contents of the data set. For example, looking for specific words or collocations in a text corpus. So the solution that we are working on and have already started implementing is to have now a unified query front end, an interface, which expresses queries in a language that we call Lex CQL, which uses the international standard contextual query language, CQL, and then builds and extends it for lexical resources. So CQL is a well-known formal language that has been used for information retrieval for quite some time. So these Lex CQL queries are then sent to all the connecting data centers in TeXt+, which then translate the unified query into the local query engines at their respective endpoints. So by this procedure, users can in fact query multiple resources in parallel, and they do not have to learn the query languages for each participating institution. And as I said, this is not just a concept, but our partners are already implementing it, and I will be happy to show you a demo in the break of this conference. But for now, I will concentrate on some screenshots to avoid running into any kind of demo problems. Okay, so here we see a first example of how you can query a lemma in this particular portal. And what you see, I hope big enough, well, it's a bit small, is there's a window. You can select the query language. And I took a lemma that translates easily into English, so the lemma is gut, or English good. And what you see here then is that the search actually found 28 resources in this federated database, and 15 of them actually had matching resources. And some of them are listed here. In the next slide, I have a little bit more information, and you can see things a little bit better, I think. Pardon me for a minute. So the interface gives you input pane for putting in CQL queries. You can select also different query languages. If you're interested just in one particular resource, you could, for example, just select, say, the query system Rover for Germanet, if that's what you're looking for. Then you get a summary of what's found, and then you get snippets of the particular resources that contain relevant entries. So in this particular case, we see that there are different lexica at 4 locations: Leipzig, Trier, and Berlin. And you can see here that we have some very renowned German dictionaries, like the Grimm's historical dictionary of the brothers Grimm, who collected the fairy tales for the German language, and then also generated a accompanying lexicon. You also see that gut can be a noun here in the findings that of the conversation lexicon, which is housed at the University of Trier. So this then gives you a broad overview and also a way to combine these findings into, say, one digital resource. You can also then immediately link some of these successful queries to the full lexical entry. So in this particular case, there's a link to the German Wortschatz, which has a kind of knowledge graph for the various entries, very much like what we have in a WordNet as well. And so you can also then browse the collocations, for example, of this particular lemma. fact that gut can also be a noun or an adjective, then of course makes it very convenient not to just search for lemmas, but also for part of speech. So we can also specialize the search, and then we get, again, a subset of the sources that we've seen before. So this is part of the query language, to be able to also look for parts of speech. And we can also look, and this I think is important, for morphologically complex words like Qualität, quality in English, that has a derivational suffix, in English idi, in German ität. And what's important for linguistic research is that we can then also look for lemmas that end in this particular suffix. So this gives us a good idea of the productivity, for example, of suffixes and their meaning. So this is something that's already implemented in the language, in the query language, I should say. The other thing that we allow in these lexical queries is to define, in addition, attributes that you may want to look for in the definition of particular entries in a lexicon. So, for example, in an explanatory dictionary, you typically have free text that describes the meaning of the word in sometimes a controlled language. So if we say, okay, let's look at these suffixes, and we want to look only for nouns that express some particular property, then it will do a full text search over the definitional part of the dictionary and retrieve all those words that, for which the definition satisfies this particular constraint. Now, this federated search architecture has been implemented by the Saxonian Academy of Sciences and Humanities, but in part also by the Leibniz Institute for the German Language, and I'm giving credit here to my colleagues at both institutions. I'm going a little bit into the technical detail now. This particular federated search for lexica builds on an earlier system that was built in the Clarion system, in the Clarion initiative, the Clarion federated content search. And if you want to know a little bit about the sort of specifications, well, this is a architecture of web services that uses the RESTful architecture for web services, and it aggregates the data then in a common portal, and the corpus queries for the queries for searching corpora are using the CQP, that is the corpus query language that is basically a de facto standard. But it's important to realize that this is not meant as a replacement for local search engines. It's just a way of federating these local search engines. And then technically it works like this. It's a client-server architecture, and the client is the search portal that then is connected to certain FCS endpoints using this search and retrieve URL protocol with this FCS extension, and then finally is being transduced into these local query engines, and then the results are pooled again as a response to the client. And this is what we use, this Clarion technology, for searching the textual parts of our collections. There is much more than textual resources in what we gather among language collections, but I won't get into that here. The federated content search for corpora then gives you various ways of returning the queries and visualizing them here. For example, the search in the German text archive, a corpus of historical data that is rendered with context information up to a certain window. And this actually now brings me to the second part of the talk, namely how to deal with legal limitations on providing access to data and sharing data. So this is actually a complex problem because there are many different aspects to data access and data sharing, and there are at least 3 dimensions that one has to take into consideration. One is intellectual property rights, and of course for language resources, in particular copyright. But there is also issues of privacy protection. For example, when you're dealing with medical applications and, for example, patient data. And this is the type of data that at least 2 of the consortia in the national research data infrastructure are dealing with. And so they are very much focusing on privacy protection. And finally, there's also data size limitation because, for example, when you're dealing with web crawls, et cetera, then you're now talking about resources at such a giant scale that one has to worry about how to distribute such data. But what we're doing at the moment in TextPlus is really focusing on the first dimension, on intellectual property rights, and in particular on issues of copyright. So the solution that we want to implement here is to create what's called derived data form or text formats. There's a reference here to a number of colleagues from TextPlus that have published on this very notion of derived text formats. So what does that mean? Well, you want to transform copyrighted text through information reduction. That is, you want to mask certain words, say, or you want to abstract away from the lexical integrity and just back off, so to speak, to their part of speech, to lose much of the text structure, which is, of course, under copyright, especially in Germany if you're dealing with texts that were published later than 1920. So we have a unique opportunity, actually, to be able to distribute and give access to colleagues to such data because the National Library is mandated to collect all publications in German or about German and Germany starting in the 1900s. So the material is all there and increasingly also available in digital form. So the question now is, how can we make it available for research without violating copyright law? Now, one of the important recent innovations in copyright law, not just in Germany, but all across Europe, is to create an exception for text and data mining. In other words, you are now allowed to use such copyrighted materials, for example, for data analytic projects. However, you are not allowed to give it to others. In other words, you can't really share the data with other researchers, and this is, of course, a severe limitation. You can only rely on memory institutions like libraries to do that for you. And of course, they are also somewhat, hesitant in this new situation, what exactly is allowed and what isn't. So the idea of transforming the original data is to then somehow turn the documents into another representation that is safe, so to speak. In other words, that doesn't allow reconstruction of the original data, for example, and yet is informative enough so that you can use it for particular research tasks, say in the digital humanities or in computational linguistics. And one of the well-known one, of course, is to turn the textual information into what's called a term document matrix, as it's been used for many years in information retrieval, right? So in other words, you create a matrix that contains in a sparse, typically in a sparse matrix, that is with lots of entries, having 0 counts, this kind of representation. Another thing you can do is you can scramble the text and lose sequence information in that respect. And this is acceptable if a bag of words, so-called bag of words representation is sufficient for doing your particular task. And finally, there is also the possibility of what's called token-based information reduction. In other words, where you may back off the lexical identity of a particular token to say it's part of speech. Now, you might wonder, where are the n-grams, famously introduced in the Google Books project and the Google Books n-gram viewer? Well, they are, of course, also a good example of a derived data format, but they involve then basically sequences of tokens that, for example, of course, are used for language modeling, and that is, of course, also an important format. The one that we want to focus on here, though, is data formats that just address individual tokens. So I already talked about the term document matrices. So then you transform the document into a vector space representation, as it's shown here in the diagram. But you can also scramble a text, and when you read this particular text, you see that it's not, grammatical English, and you can only verify that this is actually a scrambled text if you know the original. And the question then is, once you have this scrambled text, is there a way to retrieve the original or not? If you can't do that, well, then from a copyright perspective, you're in much better shape. And the third representation that I alluded to is that you basically, for a certain portion of the data, you replace the lexical items by their part of speech. And you can do this in such a way that, again, it becomes harder to be able to retrieve the original. You can also combine, of course, these different text formats by doing some additional masking, for example. You cannot just use part of speech, but you can, for example, create identifiers for function words, and you can then, more and more lose the lexical integrity of the original. Now, why do you want to do all this? Well, in order to investigate how usable these derived text formats really are for different text and data mining tasks. In other words, there is no point in making such formats available to researchers if they say, well, that's maybe a way for you to get around the copyright limitations, but it's really not good enough for my particular application. So what you really want to do then is to sort of find a sweet spot between transforming the data into a hopefully copyright-free format, and at the same time still being able to use the data in such a way that they can be lead to important research results. And now I want to give you an example of this kind. On the previous slide, I enumerated some of these tasks that digital humanities scholars will typically be interested in. A big part of research has been on what's called authorship attribution. In other words, you have a text and you don't know who the author is, and you are then trying to sort of do similarity studies between known texts to known authors, and then trying to figure out what a new text is most similar to. In other words, is that new text in close similarity to any of these other texts in the collection, so that we can then with some confidence say, okay, this must be author X, Y, or Z. Okay, sentiment analysis we all know about. Topic modeling is another important consideration, but also data you reuse. In other words, you may not want to use exactly the same data and in exactly the same format, but you may want to use parts of it. This may sound a bit strange maybe for language studies, but in music, for example, you may take part of a song, and sometimes there are big lawsuits over a jingle of only a couple of seconds, and people get sued for a lot more money than linguists ever will to reuse such a jingle, right? So these are known questions, and the question then is how much of a portion of, say, a song or some other data of performing arts you're allowed to use. That's what's meant by data reuse. So if you scramble, say, a music recording, when are you safe enough that you cannot recognize the original recording anymore? Right? So there is then this sort of tension or competition between information loss, which you need to do in order to avoid copyright violation, and still being the resulting transformed data being usable. And one of our colleagues in Text Plus, Kylie Du from the University of Trier, has actually done an extensive study of authorship classification. He took 3 different corpora for German, French, and English literature, and you see the statistics here. They're of comparable size, and the question was, can he still use, or can one still use the kinds of derived data formats that I showed you earlier? And the answer is positive. It is, in fact, possible to use these derived formats with an acceptable loss in performance. So what you see here, and I can't get into the details, but I'd be happy to tell you more about it when in the discussion period. So the idea is you can remove different portions, quantities of the original text, starting from removing nothing to, say, removing all of the words or replacing them by their part of speech tag, right? And then you can turn that into a document term matrix, and you do certain standardizations that are called Z transformations, so basically trying to take the relative frequency and then normalize that with respect to mean and standard deviation. And you take only the most frequent words. You use a classifier. He used support vector machine and a five-fold cross-validation, and you repeat this 10 times, this whole workflow in order to guard against accidental variance in the analysis. And this is the kind of thing that you see. And S stands for not significant. In other words, these bug plots, first of all, show that you can basically lose up to certainly 30% of the data by deletion or by replacement by their part of speech. And you still get basically the same quality that you got when you had the original text, right? So this is very good news. In other words, these derived data formats, are for this particular problem quite interesting and a good substitute. And as I said, I can give you more information about this study if you're interested. Okay, so looks like we're done. Well, almost. The question nonetheless, and this is the sort of nagging question, are these transformed data types, these data transformations, actually safe with respect to copyright infringement? Because that was the problem that we started with. And there are two considerations that one has to look at here. One is recognizability. In other words, if you have a scrambled text or a text where a certain portion of the words are masked in one way or another, is it still possible for people to sort of guess correctly what text is involved? You may have seen certain game shows on TV where they show you, a person, a photograph of a person, and then they sort of start, revealing certain parts of the photo, and the idea is who can guess first that it's Albert Einstein on the photo, right? So this is a little bit like that. So the question is, can one make educated guesses that this is, for example, say, a sonnet by Shakespeare or a novel by, say, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe? And if you can make these educated guesses, then you have a problem if the material is still under copyright. The second one is a consideration in the German copyright law. It's called Werkgenuss. In other words, enjoyment of a particular text. So if you have a beautiful poem and you can get a copy of it that may not be the original, but close to it, is it possible to get the same aesthetic reaction to this particular work than if it was the original? Now, this is something that lawyers have dreamt up, but in order to protect the author of an original piece of work, you want to guard against that, right? Now, how does this look now with respect to these derived data formats that we have been doing, or I've been showing you some examples of? The common wisdom is that the reconstruction of a text, or even smaller but relevant passages of the text, is non-trivial, and it's certainly fraught with uncertainties, right? So this question, whether given, say, a scrambled text, is there a way to reconstruct the original text, is not that easy to answer. And it's gotten just a little bit more difficult to answer with large language models like ChatGPT. And I want to show you an example of that sort now. So large language models could provide a kind of challenge that would work in disfavor of making text available. And I'll show you an example. So this is an example that our colleague Khalidou actually ran. right? So the original text is Sherlock Holmes took his bottle from the corner of the mantelpiece and his hypodermic syringe from its neat Morocco case. That's the original. And so he used, like we all do now when we have time, ChatGPT, and told ChatGPT to please reconstruct the original given a transformed data rendition of this original, right? So he typed into ChatGPT, please help me to rebuild the following string into a correct sentence. And now this is the badly scrambled text. Need from Sherlock took his bottle, his syringe hypodermic, the of the and its Morocco case, Holmes from corner mantelpiece. Okay, so the question is, can a large language model figure out what to do? And the answers are, unfortunately, too good to not be of concern for your average researcher. So the answers that were given, on the one hand, was from the corner mantelpiece, Sherlock Holmes took his bottle, his hypodermic syringe, and its Morocco case. Well, that's not the original, but it's certainly reasonably close. And the other thing it came up with was from the corner mantelpiece, Sherlock took his hypodermic needle, syringe, etc., etc. I won't read it all, but the point is, ChatGPT doesn't quite figure it out, but what about the next language model that the OpenAI will publish in half a year, right? So it's a little uncomfortable situation, and we don't really know how to deal with that when it comes to these derived text formats. So we also need some sort of measure of saying, okay, this is close enough to the original, and this is the distance, the linguistic distance, say, between the original and the derived text. One thing you immediately will think about is something like edit distance or Levenshtein distance, so that you can actually quantify this. But is it really enough just to have a measure that looks only at basically syntactic operations? Don't we need also something that is more looking at semantic similarity, right? Because especially if we're dealing with questions of data reuse, if we have a text that's semantically uncomfortably similar to the original, then we should probably issue a warning that this cannot be distributed to researchers without the danger of copyright infringement. So here, word embeddings, of course, which are now rapidly developing and very high quality, would give us, I think, a good measure of such semantic similarity. So what's the result? Well, as I told you, we don't have the final answers here, but for the particular case that Kylie Du was working on, namely looking at authorship attribution, we can sort of give a smiley the green light as far as recognizability and enjoyment of the works. In other words, reading these particular texts is certainly not enjoyable. In other words, they passed that test and are reasonably safe on that particular score. But with respect to reconstructability, the jury is still out. We don't really know whether we can, if we give such derived formats out to scholars, whether they won't be able to reconstruct the original data. So here, more research is really needed. And in particular, and this is what the library professionals are particularly concerned about, is if you give people more than one particular derived format, then the the danger of being able to reconstruct the original from these different formats increases, right? So the wisdom is, okay, we're probably reasonably safe if we give out only one derived format, but we don't want to give like a whole collection of them with different advantages and disadvantages. So what does all of this mean? Well, it means that more research, and now I'm already coming to future work, we really need to extend use cases for derived data formats beyond just computational literary studies. So we need to look at other tasks and see to what extent derived data formats are useful and still legally safe. The other part of the equation here, and this is where I'm sort of returning to the importance of research data infrastructures across many scientific disciplines, is that we create an awareness among publishing houses, but also data providers in hospitals and other venues to address this issue jointly with us so that we can, as researchers, say these are the kinds of tasks that we need data for, and we need data that are fresh data, that are not data that are more than 100 years old. For example, think about patient data about epidemics like we just had and still are at the tail end of. So how can we organize this? And I think this is, again, a case where it really helps to have a national initiative across many different disciplines to be able to advise our policymakers and legal experts what we would need, and at the same time respect the intellectual property rights of the owners of these data, because the digital age has already led to different attitudes toward common data and making them available for all kinds of important data analytic tasks. Think, for example, just also about climate change and the kind of data collections that will be necessary there. So I think it's very encouraging to talk to colleagues in other fields as we are doing in this collection of 26 different disciplines. And this is, I think, something to continue and to intensify. So here I'm already addressing future work in the NFDI. This is one of the very concrete actions that we want to see through to see whether we can make some real progress and also get new legislation that will help research. But then, of course, there are many other activities we need to work on. For example, creating a common portal for all text plus services. And this brings me back to the beginning of the talk then, where I was talking about federated lexical search. And there are many other services along these lines. So I thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to address some questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the nice talk. Now we have time for questions. Some questions? Betty?
Okay, thank you, Erhard, for the nice talk. It had two parts, very interesting. So my question addresses the first one. I'm very curious how you are connected to Clarin first, and then what are the services that are most used by the stakeholders, the users? Do you have some statistics or some observations? What are the services, the lexicons or, I don't know, analyzers, or what is more requested? Maybe per group, maybe it's not so general. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, this is a great question. I'd be happy to address some parts of it. It turns out that monitoring is becoming a very important consideration in the German national research data infrastructure, because politicians want to know whether they're putting their money in the right place. Huh? So they want to know how much are your services actually being used. And we will have to address this question in our preliminary report next year. We've been doing this kind of monitoring, of course, already in previous initiatives like Clarin, also at the European level increasingly. And it's really quite instructive what comes out. So we have created an automatic annotation platform called Weblicht, which I didn't talk about, but I talk about it often, so I figured I wouldn't talk about it today. It turns out that that is one of the most widely used services. And when things don't work, as they did this morning while I was preparing for the conference, people let you know about it. They say, wait a minute, your service doesn't work. What happened, right? And of course, they want immediate feedback and fix the problem, right? So this is one way you'll know whether somebody uses your service because they will complain, right? And I used to be very nervous, oh God, our service doesn't work. But there is a very nice anecdote by the colleagues at the Linguistic Data Consortium in Philadelphia. And we were at some conference, and we were both sort of exchanging notes on what happens when your services don't work. And I mentioned how we always get nervous, and they said, just relax. There is no such thing as a linguistic emergency. And in other words, the world won't go under if your service is down. It's regrettable and so on. This is one of the most helpful remarks that I've received from colleagues. Yeah? So I want to share it with you. Just be sure to know that there are no linguistic emergencies, right? So things can work, can wait a little bit. And my wife, who's collaborating with me on many of these services and has also greatly contributed to Weblicht, she gets particularly upset when things don't work. And I say, look, let's go for a walk. There are no linguistic emergencies, right? So that's one part of the answer. The other part is also the kind of people that sort of are interested in particular services. So one of the things that I have found out more and more is that people are quite keen on using WordNets, for example. And we get more and more requests from individuals who say, we want to learn German, and it seems like having a semantic net is a really great way to teach yourself a language, because it's not like, you open a dictionary and then you just have an alphabetic list of words. But you might be interested in, say, particular vegetables, because you want to become a cook or something, right? And then that's much easier if you have a thesaurus or, say, a WordNet, because you can just sort of browse, and people love to browse, right? So it's sort of the right metaphor also for learning. And I think this is, and I'm very happy that you are now working on open WordNet for Bulgarian, I think this is a very good resource to be developing, because it will also promote, I think, Bulgarian as a language.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, I have one question. This second point here, developing a common portal for all text. Sorry. Developing a common portal for all text services means that it's not necessary to make extraction from the text, but processing, let's say, in libraries, for example. Okay, and then extract, let's say, topics or keywords or something like this. But again, comparing to the large language models, we can imagine that from the topic extracted from some work, the language can generate similar text or similar work, depending on the topic. So even this could be a problematic result from such research. What do you think?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, and that is something that we are aware of. It also comes up with OCR material, right? Because the libraries increasingly try to OCR text from, say, older versions of German, and we would like to make that available, that material, right? Because for historical researchers, it's a very important resource. So the other side of the coin, though, is I think, I mean, these large language models, they are something that, is so new that it's a little bit early to see exactly what the future will be. I mean, there is one future that, and certain people recommend that you now basically sell all your Google stock, because the idea is in, say, a few years, there won't be any search engines anymore because you don't need them. Instead, we will all be using just the latest ChatGPT, and then we ask ChatGPT a particular question, and then we'll get an answer, right? And the factology, as people are now calling it, will then be somehow solved. And this is, I think, very much an open question. I think that this will have a big impact also on how we build services for research data infrastructure. Personally, I think research data infrastructures have a lot to offer in this arena, because we have high-quality data, carefully curated data, that will be able to sort of weed out the noise that, say, web crawl data still have, right? And I would think, and this also comes back to, I think, to your question, Petya, that it's by no means that we will be put out of, we meaning scholarly consortia that want to really preserve data for academic research, or just nonprofit activities, will be put out of work by these large language models. I think in time, I would expect that having high quality data will be an important corrective for the noisy data that you often now see for developing such engines.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, I think it's time for lunch. So thank you very much.